3, 2.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to our weekly media briefing and public health update with Montgomery County Executive Marc Elrich. I'm Lorna Virgili, Hispanic Public Information Officer, and joining us today is Dr. Keisha Davis, the county's health officer, Drs. James Bridgers, Director of the Department of Health and Human Services, Dr. Earl Stoddard, Assistant Chief Administrative Officer, and our guest today is Jim Stowe, Director of the Office of Human Rights. Thank you for joining us, everyone. Mr. County Executive, good afternoon. It's been a busy morning for you.
It's been a busy morning, been a busy day. So thank you, everybody, for being here again today. This morning, I had a meeting with Governor Moore, and after the meeting, we showed him how we're adding electric vehicle charging stations throughout the county. We met at the Seneca Woodvale Apartments in East County to see how charging stations can be and are being utilized in equity emphasis areas. Our county's been a front runner in helping companies through the Montgomery County Green Bank add charging stations to their properties for employees and residents. We also have used local, state, and federal money to add EV charging stations to public garages and community centers in the county. There are 64 charging ports in Bethesda, Silver Spring, and Wheaton. The point is to make them accessible to more people so that consumers seriously consider buying or renting an EV next time when they need a vehicle. And that was kind of brought home by one of the residents there who was interviewed by his electric vehicle. When the governor asked him, did the charger influence his decision? The guy said that when he realized that the apartment complex was going to have an electric charger there, it was the thing that convinced him we should go ahead and buy an electric vehicle. Charging is, we know, a big issue for people, and the availability of chargers, they're still not at the level of the availability of gas stations. And I think the more chargers we bring on and that people can find them, the more likely we are to get people make that conversion over. The other thing that's happening, you'll be seeing some of this year, is the dropping of EV prices below $30,000. And there's some EVs that may well price in the mid-20s. So change is coming, prices are getting better, battery life is getting better, and the ability to get chargers is going to get easier. We had an important discussion in relationship to our efforts to reduce carbon. Montgomery County is home to 31% of the plug-in vehicles in Maryland, which is a pretty high percentage. And we need to continue to expand the infrastructure to make it work. With the governor's support and private partnerships, like with the Orlo Company, I know Montgomery County is going to be successful in leading the way toward electric vehicles. And this is a good example of how the availability is going to help increase people's willingness to go electric. So we're glad we could share this with the governor. And another important discussion in relation to our efforts to reduce carbon emissions is how we can use our own waste to create energy. And I want to acknowledge and thank the work of WSSC and MC.DOT, who celebrated the opening of the Piscataway Bioenergy Facility that is now producing methane gas that will help fuel our ride-on buses, a contract that we agreed to with them last summer. According to WSSC, the region creates about 8,000 tons of biosolids per month, which are then turned into renewable natural gas. The solids are then left behind and are used as additives for landscapes and gardens. Transportation is 42% of our greenhouse gas emissions. Increasing the efficiency and reliability of our ride-on bus system is an important part of reducing our carbon emissions by 100% by 2035. This agreement is an important improvement for our natural gas-powered ride-on vehicles, and when coupled with our new electric buses and solar-powered bus depots, it's another example of how the county has made significant progress toward our climate goals and is leaving a positive legacy for future generations. November is Remembrance and Reconciliation Month, and in this month, we are hoping to have discussions that invite people to have discussions and learn more in rediscovering Montgomery County history. Our county will have several opportunities to reflect on foundational problems of racism in Montgomery County through Remembrance and Reconciliation Month this November. This effort is put forth by the Office of Human Rights. We can look back at the wrongs of our past, acknowledge how racism influenced policies and practices, and move on from them. Tomorrow also marks the 160th anniversary since our state's Emancipation Day. Maryland was one of the first states to abolish slavery in its constitution, ahead of the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery nationwide the next year. That was a good thing for Maryland to do, given the fact that almost every inch of this county was covered with plantations at the end of the Civil War. Some of the events planned for the next few weeks focus on slavery and others on more recent examples in which Black families were denied equal opportunities through education, housing, and wealth opportunities. Discrimination in housing was extreme, particularly on the part of the government, until the mid-1960s. Black residents, and along with them, often Jewish people, could not buy or rent housing in Montgomery County. In the end of the 1950s and early 60s, white residents of Washington who were leaving DC because DC was integrating at the time were being encouraged to move to Silver Spring, where housing was still segregated. Segregated housing was actually a selling point. Today, the director of our Office of Human Rights, Jim Stowe, is joining me to talk about these events. And thank you for joining us today, Jim.
Good afternoon, sir. My pleasure. We're here to talk about, as the county executive has shared with all of you, our activities for Remembrance and Reconciliation Month, the month of November. And we're excited about this month in one respect because we get a chance then to get engaged the entire community in understanding about our history, some of which is quite disturbing, but at the same time, it is our history. When we talk about this particular event, we always have to make sure that we say their names. Mr. George Peck, who was lynched over in Poolsville. Mr. John Diggs Dorsey, who was lynched here in Rockville. And also Mr. Sidney Randolph, lynched also here in Rockville. And so when looking at this particular history, we have found as we've begun this process as a commission since 2020, to begin to look at the earnest truth about what happened. To the extent we've been able to find out, we've engaged historians and all kinds of folks to help us better understand those three incidences. And of course, when looked at the actual cause of death by parties unknown is how it's actually characterized. And so those deaths obviously remain then unsolved. And so we look at this in terms of how do we now go forward. This is the remembrance part I just talked about. Now, what about the reconciliation part? How do we get to a point of understanding this, hearing it, understanding it and receiving it, understanding it and getting past it? And that's our work toward reconciliation. So this coming month in November, we've set aside a number of activities, and we're inviting the entire community, by the way, to be engaged in some activity, better informed and better share this history we're talking about and talk about ideas toward reconciliation. And so one for which I'm very, very excited about is having to go at the Josiah Henson Museum Center. And it will be a full day for our young people to not only find out about Josiah Henson, but also about this issue involving, again, this reconciliation is so important as part of that process. And so we'll be working with that particular group of folks, our team members, and presenting a day full for all of our students to come out and be a part of it. A day we're hoping to be able to grant them free of charge. And to have them somehow or another be really moved by what takes place there. And so we're looking forward to that being a really, really wonderful event that'll actually occur on November the 2nd. We've got events occurring, as I said, throughout the month. I'll just highlight just a few more of them. Also, Sandy Springs Museum in Sandy Springs always does an outstanding job as an annual, again, Emancipation Day. And we're excited about what they're doing there. And so we invite you to be part of that process. There's going to be a very interesting conversation on Brown v. Board, 70 years later, being done by our Montgomery County Public Schools. There'll be a webinar, so it'll be a chance then for you to tune in and be a part of that discussion as well. And then Montgomery County, this is our Department of well, actually it's our Humanities Council, Arts and Humanities Council for Montgomery County. They've got an event coming up called Launch Out of Darkness on the 19th of November. It'll be over at the Silver Spring Civic Building, an opportunity there for engage in a wonderful art display and gallery presentation. And so as you see, we've got a variety of things going on. You can find out about all these activities, by the way, by going to our website at montgomerycountymd.gov/human rights. And there you'll see a listing of all the activities I described here ever so briefly, but you get a chance to get more details there.
Thank you, Jim. Members of the media, if you have any questions regarding the Remembrance and Reconciliation Month, please raise your hand right now and we'll call on you so that you can ask your questions regarding this particular month. Any questions for Mr. Stowe? No questions this afternoon? Well, thank you so much for joining us, Jim. It was great to see you last night. And you can remain on the call or you can depart if you have to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Today marks the beginning of Diwali, and I want to wish happy Diwali to all the Hindus, Jains, Sikhs, and Muslims around the county and the world who are marking the victory of light over darkness. The celebration continues next week, and the county will host its 14th annual Diwali celebration on Friday, November 6th at the Executive Office Building in Rockville. I look forward to celebrating the Festival of Lights with everyone. And before I open this up to the questions, I'm just going to turn it over to the health team to see if they've gotten any updates for this week.
Good morning, afternoon now. No updates. We are continue to be in our fall break with COVID levels are low-ish and fall and RSV haven't quite risen, which means it's a great time to get your COVID and flu vaccine. This gives us great protection before the winter holidays, before Thanksgiving and before the Christmas and Hanukkah and New Year's. I will also encourage folks as you are sorting through all of your kids' Halloween candy this evening to put some of it aside so you don't have to binge out on all of that sugar. So nice health message for for all of the incoming candy. Just because it's there doesn't mean you have to eat it. Donate some of it to the troops. So that's all from the public health team. I'll turn it over to Dr. Bridgers.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. There are no additional updates on the human services side of the house. So I'll toss it over to Dr. Stoddard now.
Yeah, the only thing I will add is obviously the public safety side of the house has been focused on election security, making sure that we're supporting the Board of Elections in their efforts to conduct both early voting right now, collect ballots for mail-in through the drop boxes, as well as in preparation for Election Day next week. Our goal here is to make sure that we are prepared so that our voters don't need to worry about the security and safety because we've already taken care of it for them. So certainly take questions related to that as well, but obviously this is a major effort this week and into next week as well. So so far so good. No specific or credible threats related to elections in Montgomery County, and frankly things have gone smoothly thus far, and I think that's in large part due to the work of the Board of Elections and their staff, as well as those supporting them in these efforts. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Members of the media, any questions right now for the county executive and or the other officials? Dana Monroe, The Washington Post, good afternoon.
Afternoon. Hi, Dr. Stoddard. Question on the election security thing. We saw from the Maryland Elections Board that there had been an incident somewhere in Maryland, and we wondered if you guys had any information about that or had altered the way you were conducting the election safety in response to that.
Yeah, it was not in Montgomery County, is my understanding. My understanding it was north of here. I don't want to confirm on behalf of another jurisdiction where it was, but it was not in Montgomery County. Obviously, we're working with our Board of Elections, who does employ the staff and volunteers who support early voting, and will similarly do so on Election Day. We have police available, much like we did on October 7th. We're gonna have a roving team from our police department that will be available to continue to visit election sites, and will help with making sure that election workers, are able to safely leave the building and all those things that might be concerns there. So I don't think we're going to need to alter our strategy, because we had sort of leaned forward on this particular election, just knowing that, you know, the level of public discourse has been heightened. I don't think that's a particularly political thing to say. I think we've all seen it and all felt it, and felt that you know, we just need to make sure that we're leading forward on this particular election more so than probably any in recent memory. And so I don't think we've had to change anything at this point, but this is a constant evaluation that's going on. They're talking on a daily basis. They're talking before they do each canvass to make sure that the threat environment hasn't changed in any way, and there's nothing that particularly should be of concern. And so we've had a very flexible and we've leaned forward, but we also will react to information. And so I don't think we'll need to change anything, but I don't also, if we do change things, I also probably won't talk too much about the specific preparations that we're doing as a result.
Mr. County Executive, were you going to say something?
No, I just was kind of agreeing with Earl. The only thing I'd say was, in the interesting election news of the day, was that Virginia was given permission to continue purging people from the voter rolls just days before the election. It's kind of a typical Republican power play. If you aren't sure of the election outcome, let's just make sure we can get people off those voter rolls. It's very unfortunate to see this happening at a time, and I hope that, you know, some of the people we work with take note of what Virginia is doing and contrast that with Maryland's doing, which is trying to make sure that everybody gets to vote, not that we use our power in the executive branch to limit who gets to vote. I think it's an interesting distinction between our approaches to things.
I have a follow-up question on that. Is this roving team of officers a new thing this election? Yeah.
It is, and this is something that we actually developed, as I said, for the October 7th, obviously on the anniversary of the beginning of the Israeli Palestinian conflict, and we had roving teams visiting on that particular day. They were, you know, houses of worship across the county, just as a, hey, we're out here sort of to allay concerns that might be out there. But basically, our roving team of officers will be, you know, we'll just be driving around the county, visiting, not staying or being overly oppressive or visible at our election sites per se, but just being available. They're not taking calls for service, unlike our other officers do on any given day. They'll be available just to address any issues that might emerge with an election site or the like. And so this is something new that we've done this year that is sort of an effort to lean forward and just make sure that we're flexible enough to respond to anything that might emerge.
Do you know how many officers are dedicated to that squad?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I could find that out for you. We can
Thank
connect.
you.
Thank you, Dana.
Thank
No,
you.
Thank you. Members of the media, any more questions for the officials today? No more questions? Going once? Oh, there's Scott Lynn, WMAL. Good afternoon, Scott. Unmute, please. We see your hand up, Scott. Do you have a question this afternoon or questions? If so, you need to unmute.
There's a message in the chat.
Let's see.
Can you please speak about the talk of term limits for your office? Can you expound on your view? As you stated previously, almost comparable to an athletic coach, with things taking time to develop and personnel to mesh. Does the incumbent have an inherent advantage? Do you believe it's not a referendum on you if this is brought to the fore by anyone else?
Did you ask a lot of questions there? Let me see if I can digest them all. Perhaps I will open up the chat. I can actually see the question. I mean, a couple of things. I mean, I've been very public that I would oppose a 2-term limit on an executive, regardless of who the executive is, because it is very difficult to, you know, first of all, put together a team in your first term. It's easily 1 to 2 years before people are all hired, and then actually get to know their departments. It's not like you walk into a department and everything is running perfectly the way you want it to, and you just sit back and watch it whir away. You actually have to make executive decisions. You have to know who your personnel are. You have to know what the department's objectives are. And it was true with Ike, and it was true with me that it took almost a year to fill every slot, and that you continue to have your managers then learn when they as they become officially acting. Then toward the end of that first term, if everybody knows you're not going to have a second term, if you get a vacancy and you have to fill the vacancy, it's extraordinarily difficult to get people to agree to sign on for an appointed office that's appointed by the executive if they don't know they're going to have a longer run than just 4 years. A lot of people don't like to change their positions every 4 years and would prefer to be in a stable environment. And taking that environment away and saying, well, within 4 years, you're going to be having to replace this person with another candidate by another executive just makes it harder to attract people when you need them. And I think that probably the worst thing is it turns the executive into a lame duck. And as a lame duck, you wind up with many council members and others who are going to be jockeying for running in the next election. And I can tell you firsthand experience that turning everything into a political show is not the best thing for legislative processes. When everybody's focused on how do I advance myself, usually at somebody else's expense, it's a little bit more difficult to get things done. So, in a non-personal way, those are the things that I think would be concerning and should concern anybody who's, thinking about voting for it, whether you like me or don't like me. I will point out that I'd be up for election in 2 years, which is the term limit that's supposed to be out there. And if in 2 years I wasn't, and people didn't want to vote for me, they wouldn't vote for me. And you have to go through two processes. You have to go through a Democratic primary, and you have to then go through the general election. I can say for sure, because I heard people canvassing for signatures, that during the canvass, they were talking very much about me. They weren't talking about the benefits of term limits. They were very pointed that they don't agree with a lot of my policies. And this was an opportunity to get rid of me, and not have me stand for another election. They don't want me to stand for another election because they know full well they're not going to beat me in another election. And they managed to get funding from a group of developers, another shock, I'm sure, to many people. And this is another group that has spent millions of dollars, literally millions and millions of dollars over the past 2 elections, 4 years apart, and weren't able to beat me. And now this is the simplest thing for them, is try to convince people that they should vote for term limits, then they don't have to worry about actually running an election against me. They also didn't tell people there are already term limits. They basically approached people and saying, we support term limits. We hope you support term limits too. We'd like you to sign this petition. They didn't tell people that the current executive has a limit of 3 terms, and that the council has a limit of 3 terms. Some people were smart enough and knew that and kind of rejected the petition, but a lot of people don't know that we have term limits. We don't talk about term limits, haven't talked about them since the referendum passed years ago. So they were far from honest in what they were doing, and this has nothing to do with better government. It's just their strategy to avoid an election in 2 years where they don't think their chances are too high on winning. If they were confident that I would get beaten, then you'd beat me in the election, because doing this now doesn't remove me any sooner than I'd be removed if I lost an election in 2 years. So yeah, this is pretty personal for them. And it is what it is. It's politics, but it's not good government. And you all shouldn't be confused about that.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. Members of the media, any more questions this afternoon? No more questions? Well, thank you for joining us. Have a great afternoon. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.